So I found arm wrestling when I was very little. The first time that I found arm wrestling, I was probably around 5 years old. My grandmother was like the best woman arm wrestler on the oil fields in Canada. So the story goes. Okay, she used to come over to my place, our place, and my reward for going and picking her apples for the apple pies that she used to bake was I got to arm wrestle her. And for me, that was a really big deal. Even from like the age of 5, I fell in love with the feeling that arm wrestling gave me. You know, that feeling where you can go as hard as you want, and it's just kind of a place of freedom. And that's really why I love arm wrestling, and that's what I've held on to throughout my whole career. I arm wrestled with my friends through public school every chance I got. Arm wrestled through high school every chance I got. I did it wrong the whole time. I was turn and burn, right? I was bend your wrist and go to the side. Nothing wrong with that, but that's all I knew back then. I loved arm wrestling probably more than the rest of my friends, but it was just a small part of what I did. I liked to play basketball, I liked to do weights, all the normal stuff. I went and worked in the oil field. I was 18, and my boss was a guy called Devon Larratts. The dude was like a walking Canadian Wolverine, for real. He was like 5'7", like 165 pounds of perfection, okay? The guy ran around the shop like fire, and he was the most functionally fit human being I may have ever met in my life. Everybody in the oil field arm wrestled. Everybody. We were all like, there was probably 500 guys in the shop between 18 and 25. And we all arm wrestled. And even from a young age, I could beat almost all of them. None of us knew what we were doing. And every time I beat somebody, it was, yeah, well, you can't beat Dion. And so I harassed this guy like crazy. I harassed him. I was like, let's go, let's go, let's go. He didn't have time for me. I was an amateur. He didn't have time for me. Eventually one day, I caught him after work. He was on his way out. I was like, Dion, let's go. And took me to the cafeteria, and he just destroyed me. He destroyed me every way I could imagine. And I was strong. I've loved fitness my whole life. I was probably like a 190-pound farm kid just made of sinew. I was strong, but I could do nothing with this guy. And as we all know, we've all been arm wrestling a while, we know how that goes, right? The guy who's never lost, that's the easiest guy to beat. Unless your name's Dennis Saplenkov. But so he crushed me. He crushed me. And there was one time I was going so hard that I almost broke my arm, and he let me win. He let me, I know he did. But I held on to that, and the next day at work, I told everybody that I beat him. And you know, I was 18, bit of an idiot. And you know, he kind of made a bit of an example of me, but I think he saw a little spark in me, and he decided to train me up. I was like his punching bag. He was getting ready for Russian Bear, the Golden Bear. You guys might have heard of that tournament. Famous tournament, one of the biggest tournaments in the world at that time. That was like 1994. Okay, it's a long time ago. Some of you probably weren't even born. So this was like a real turning point for me. I met like a real arm wrestler, somebody who understood the techniques of arm wrestling. So 1994. So at that time, I really started to understand how much I really loved arm wrestling, because it opened up a totally different side of the sport to me, the technical side, understanding this was much more than just what I thought it was. This was a time pre-internet. And it was a time where you had to find somebody. You had to find somebody who actually knew what they're doing. There was no videos, you couldn't go on, there was no YouTube. You couldn't go online, you had to know people, you had to find people. Arm wrestling was like a flyer that you'd get because you knew a guy, and then you'd go to the event and somebody hand you a flyer and you'd go to the next event. And then I moved back to Ontario, and I found in my own town where I grew up, they had an arm wrestling club. Everything was so underground. a little bit, arm wrestling's still underground, but it's better. So at that point, I was doing many sports. I was involved in judo, I was playing basketball, I was doing long distance running events, but everything, I knew that arm wrestling was going to be the one, and I just started to cut until I was basically only arm wrestling. I made it my goal, and I told everybody, even from a young age, young age in arm wrestling, people asked me where I was going, and I said, I'm going to win a world championships. I said, I want to be the best in the world. People used to laugh at me, people used to think it was crazy. And back then, there was no real money, okay? Like, there really wasn't. There was no money, there was nothing, okay? But I knew how much I loved this sport. I loved the feeling of it, I loved the purity of it, I loved the accessibility of it. I loved that it was so simple, but at the same time, you could take it as far as you wanted to go in complexity. Every day of my life since I basically met with Dion, every day of my life, arm wrestling has basically been, it's embarrassing to say, but it's basically been my #1 priority, okay? At the cost of many things in my life. Yeah, people, and it didn't make a lot of sense. Like, it didn't. My wife, we've been together since high school, okay? Jody and I have been together a very long time. She's been through everything, she's seen everything. And I think at the beginning it didn't make sense to her. It didn't make sense that I would allocate so much time and energy to something that, you know, potentially didn't make a lot of sense. But it changed. It changed. Like, I got to a point where I was actually getting pretty good. Like, I was probably the best guy in the country when I was around 25, 26. And arguably, at that point, it didn't take long before I was getting internationally recognized. Won a world title, #1 ranking, I think I was 32. Still, at that point, arm wrestling didn't make sense for any reason other than what it gave me. It didn't make any sense. Arm wrestling was still extremely small. I had no sponsors, no ability. Arm wrestling gave me no freedom. Arm wrestling just gave me the feeling, that same feeling that I had when I was 5. That was the only reward that I got. Things changed around 2013, 14. The arm wrestling world, for whatever reason, just became a little bit riper. 14, 15, 16, 17, these last 5 years, arm wrestling's come further in the last 5 years than it has in the previous 20, in my opinion. Gone are the days when I meet somebody and they find out I'm an arm wrestler and they're like, what's that? It doesn't happen anymore. People know about arm wrestling. People recognize arm wrestling. People sponsor arm wrestlers. People kind of know that we are an emerging sport. I believe very strongly within the next 3 to 5 years, we will be on the same course that the UFC was on. Yeah, so I mean, so arm wrestling for me has been through my life forever, and I will say that it will likely be with me until the end. It plays a special part in my life, but when you boil it all down, it's just for the feeling it gives me. If it wasn't for that feeling, I probably wouldn't do it. It's all the things that most sane people are looking for in the sport, they're coming now. Like money, opportunities, you know, all the extra stuff that being good at something can give you, it's all coming now. But really, I mean, I think the reason probably everybody's here tonight is because of the feeling that you get from it, okay? So that's really what I want to focus on. I want to share this with everybody. I want to have good training with you guys. So for tonight, we'll focus on really the core principles of good practice. okay? And really great arm wrestling training is done with other people, right? You can get strong in the gym, okay, and we can talk about that, how to get strong in a gym. It's a big part of arm wrestling. It's a big part of your advancement in the sport, what you do with weights. But really, what we do with each other is so much more. So senior person holds, junior person works, stay in good position. Kind of a rule that I like to follow when I arm wrestle. If I can get one person just to come up, just to show how we'll do most of the practicing for the night. Okay, so wherever, good, here we are, all right? So Ben chose to come forward, and I've chosen to come back a little bit. When I say forward, he's brought his shoulder forward. He's trying to attack my hand. Look at his shoulder position, it's superior. I'm kind of pulling up into his fingers, okay? So this is great. So we've got kind of a stop position. We can play in this position. Now, if either one of us starts to feel control, like if we start to feel comfortable, I think that a really nice thing to do is to switch, okay? So what that means is if I start to feel control, so my top roll has been set as my defense, just in the way that we interact, okay? So this is my defense. If we ever go harder, I'm gonna go hard on my top roll, okay? Now, but if I start to feel like I can advance, I'm gonna advance, oh, there we go. Now I got in, okay? So now I have control on the inside, right? And I've crossed over, so I started coming forward. If I start to feel control here, I'll offer it back up outside, okay? And that's what I want you guys to work on. Good table practice, good arm wrestling, really good solid ability on the table means you have the ability to come forward and back with your shoulder. Switch to inside, get control, switch to outside. That's how you know you have full domination on a person. And if you stay in the middle and go slow, nobody's getting hurt, everything's good. Yeah. Do you guys have any questions before we get started and play around? Ask me anything at any time, guys. We'll work out for probably like 20 minutes. We'll stop again, take a break, work out. That'll be the flow. Yeah? Cool. Sure. So for me, arm wrestling is all about strength and you know, doing it the right way. Okay, when I train for arm wrestling, it's become very simple. I used to do, when I first got involved with arm wrestling, my coach had me do just a very few exercises. All right, basically when I first started arm wrestling, the only real arm wrestling training I was doing was on a preacher, and I was doing these, you know, rocking locked preacher curls. And that was kind of the foundation on what all of my arm wrestling was built. We did a little bit of wrist stuff, but not much. It was basically we did locked preachers. And then the more I met different arm wrestlers and talked to them, they were like, no, arm wrestling is this, no, arm wrestling is that. And so what I did just grew and grew and grew, because everybody that I talked to, I tried to take and add to my game. And what happened was, after like 10 or 12 years in the sport, I was doing like 100 exercises, okay? It was way too much. The longer I stayed in the sport, the more I started cutting things. I learned that